Hey everyone, I'm Danielle D'Souza Gill. I will be hosting Dinesh's podcast today. Thanks for staying with me. We've had such an amazing week covering a lot of stories. If you're a regular Dinesh D'Souza listener, then you've probably heard me on here this week or at other times when I have substituted for Dinesh. I absolutely love it. It is such a delight to be here. I am frequently busy being a mom to my daughter Marigold, as well as supporting my husband Brandon Gill's campaign for U.S. Congress, where we live in North Texas. I'm also the author of 2 books, The Choice, The Abortion Divide in America, and Why God, an Intelligent Discussion on the Relevance of Faith. But I always love coming on here to guest host. The best way you can find me is on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, True Social, Rumble, X, all the places. I'm Danielle D'Souza Gill. Would love to see you on there. I'm always sharing new content, blowing up your newsfeed, so make sure to find me there. All right, well, we have a lot of content to get to today. We're going to be talking about the border, how the left has turned us into serfs, how they see themselves as the nobles and the rest of us as beneath them. We'll also speak to Joe Kent, the Republican nominee for U.S. Congress from Washington's 3rd Congressional District. He has an incredibly inspiring story, so you don't want to miss that. We'll also cover in depth the comparisons between JD Vance and Tim Walz and what makes JD different. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
The story of the Romanovs, Russia's last imperial family, is one of those poignantly tragic tales in history. Going back to Alexander I, the Russian emperors at least entertained the idea of reforming or abolishing Russia's traditional system of serfdom. Serfdom in Russia was brutal. It was basically a form of mass slavery where the people were owned by the aristocracy. And the aristocracy, who had full control over the serfs, were themselves exempt from certain forms of punishment. As the rest of Europe did away with their medieval feudal systems, Russia lagged behind, unable to effectively enact any substantial changes. Oddly, it was the emperors who saw the need for change. Their biggest obstacle to abolition? Russia's nobility. Who were Russia's noble class? Oh, the super wealthy and powerful elite whose historic ties to land ownership and titles ensured they were the only ones able to afford an education that qualified them to run the government. So they were not only rich, but their hands were on all the levers of power in the state. Only part of their wealth was reflected in money and land. Russian nobility also kept a diverse portfolio of souls, the government's own term for the people, or serfs, owned by the nobility. Please the emperor, and he might reward you with the tracts of land containing thousands of souls. So the nobility had a lot to lose if the emperor decided to abolish serfdom. But while they feared the serfdom's abolition, they never viewed the threat as imminent. Because they controlled the machinery of the state, they could easily slow walk, water down, or jettison any measure meant to change the status quo. And if push came to shove, they always had the ultimate veto, imperial assassination. A veto they exercised on more than one occasion. Right about now, you may be noticing some similarities between late feudal Russia and current-day America. We are, after all, talking about a wealthy class of powerful people who assume they are beyond reproach. A people who also aren't afraid of using threats or actual violence against those who jeopardize their hold on power. America isn't supposed to have a noble aristocracy class. We went to war over that concept, after all, and the Constitution forbids the conferring of titles of nobility. It is right there in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8. No title of nobility shall be granted by the United States. And yet those American elitists bear a striking resemblance to their historical European counterparts. And if they think like nobles and act like nobles and lord their power over us like nobles, then who are we to say they aren't, in fact, nobles? A good question might be to ask who they are in the first place. Sam Faddis of And Magazine recently covered a survey of America's elite, 1%, conducted by the Napolitan Institute. The survey defined the elite 1% as those who have postgraduate degrees, live in densely populated urban areas, and earn at least $150,000 annually. What they discovered about the ideas and attitudes of the elite is nothing short of shocking. Almost half of the elite surveyed believe that Americans have too much freedom. 47% of this group believe the rest of us need less autonomy and liberty. Astounding. According to the Napolitan Institute, 77% of the elites want to ration gas, electricity, and meat. 72% want to ban gas-powered vehicles. 69% want to ban gas stoves. If 47% think our freedoms need to be restricted, but 77% want to ration meat, I think there's a considerable number of the elite 1% who don't understand what constitutional freedom even means. Naturally, these ideas are abhorrent to the vast majority of Americans. According to the survey, those in lower socioeconomic segments of the population are opposed at high numbers, with percentages ranging from the 70s to more than 80%. The survey also revealed a considerable overlap between the beliefs of these elites and the views of federal government managers. Fully 51% of government managers think Americans are too free. Faddis notes, quote, close to 80% of government managers favor banning private ownership of firearms. Roughly 50% think parents have too much control over their children's education. Yikes. These are the unelected, unfireable bureaucrats running our government. Most of these sentiments, if acted upon, violate the spirit, if not the letter, of constitutional law. Maybe they wouldn't be so bad if they just knew how we felt. According to Faddis, 80% of these elites think the average American agrees with them. So they're insular, arrogant, deluded, and self-righteous. Sounds like the old-fashioned European aristocracy to me. Faddis sounds the alarm at the end of the piece, saying, quote, your government is really run by people who despise you, and quite honestly, don't give a damn what happens to you. Despise? If you think that's a bit too strong a word, keep in mind that accusations of hate are too often the first words out of a leftist's mouth. From homophobia to accusing you of racism, that's all they ever do. Accuse conservatives of hate. The point here isn't to play rhetorical tit for tat. We have a responsibility to call things as we see them. We aren't here to PR for the left and their government servitors, after all. You don't just see hatred, you experience it in profound ways. The people of North Carolina experienced it in the aftermath of Helene. Faddis quotes one Asheville resident who remarked to Jesse Waters, they keep saying we the people. No, there is no we the people, it is them versus us. Like, they're not for us, it's all about them. Meanwhile, DHS Secretary Mayorkas can't answer why the DHS can spend over $1 billion on travel and housing for illegal immigrants, but only $4 million on families affected by the hurricane. In a press gaggle covered by the New York Post, Mayorkas admitted that the Federal Emergency Management Agency, also known as FEMA, does not have the funds to see Americans through the rest of this Atlantic hurricane season because FEMA has doled out more than $1.4 billion since the fall of 2022 to address the migrant crisis. Mayorkas defensively insisted, quote, we are meeting the immediate needs with the money that we have. Wow, it's clearly too little too late. So you're making do, Secretary, or you're scrounging for change in the seat cushions of Air Force One. In another interview on MSNBC, he blamed global warming. Anything to avoid accountability. Quoted in the New York Post, Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio fumed, quote, The Biden-Harris administration took more than $1 billion tax dollars that had been allocated to FEMA for disaster relief and used it to house illegal aliens. Now they've abandoned American hurricane victims in North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, and Tennessee. Representative Tim Burchett from Tennessee concurred in a post on X, quote, FEMA spending over $1 billion on illegals while they leave Americans stranded and without help is treasonous. U.S. citizens are dying. Pray for our country, folks. Mayorkas' response is the definition of phoning it in. Thousands of lives are at stake, and his lordship, Mayorkas, is grumbling about being diverted from his pet project of bringing mass numbers of crime lords and gang members across our southern border. Maybe there's souls for his ledger. And make no mistake, there are massive numbers of criminals coming across the border. According to the New York Post, thousands have flooded into the U.S. that we know of. Oh, and do we also mention the thousands of children that DHS has lost track of? How about the recent positive jobs report? The one where, if you look at the numbers, it's only immigrants who are getting hired. The stats show that native-born Americans are still losing jobs. And since when did we have to use terms like native-born American in a jobs report analysis anyway? It's like we're second-class citizens in our own country. There's much more to discuss when it comes to the embarrassingly high levels of neglect this leftist-run Harris-Biden regime has reached. There's the economy, there's foreign policy, there's trade, all unmitigated disasters for our country's citizens. It's not that these American nobles are America last, it's that they don't even think about America at all. We can look at this disaster and examine their views and plainly see that many elitists aren't trying to force us to live like them. They have guns, they have gas-powered cars, they can afford meat if they want to eat it. They don't need to worry about being ignored after a natural disaster, after a wildfire, or after a hurricane, or if jobs are scarce. Their money buys them their rights and privileged autonomy. It doesn't matter for them if the Bill of Rights is suddenly rescinded. They have power. These changes mean nothing to them. A government without constitutionally guaranteed freedoms can't have much further to go before the majority of us are living in a feudal wasteland. And that's the truly scary thing here. Because clearly, in the minds of elites, they think we already are.
Mike Lindell is such a good guy. He's got a heart of gold, and Mike and MyPillow love giving back to those in need. They sent a truckload of 14,000 MyPillows to those impacted by Hurricane Helene. But even though Mike loves to give back, a large retail store just canceled a huge order that had already left the warehouse. So besides giving to those in need, Mike wants to pass some savings directly on to you. For the first time ever, you can get a standard classic MyPillow for wholesale prices, just $14.88. It gets better. For a limited time, they're offering their entire classic collection at wholesale prices. So get a queen-size MyPillows, $18.88. Upgrade to a king for only $1 more. Get the body pillows for just $29.88, and multi-use MyPillows for $9.88. Go to mypillow.com, use promo code Dinesh, or you can call 800-876-0227. Again, it's 800-876-0227 to take advantage of the wholesale pricing for the first time ever. On top of that, get free shipping on orders over $75. The deals haven't been offered this low before. So once again, go to mypillow.com, use promo code Dinesh, get the standard MyPillow, $14.88, the lowest price ever. By the way, limited quantities at this price, so once they're gone, they're gone. There is a lot at stake in the upcoming election, but regardless of who's sitting in the White House, the fuse on the economy has already been lit. 4 years of a conservative presidency will not be enough to turn the tide on our $35 trillion national debt. And if the left wins, it's like throwing gas on a dumpster fire. You don't have much control over the election's outcome, but you can diversify your savings now by investing in gold from Birch Gold, like Debbie and I have. For millennia, gold has stood firm in the face of greedy governments, economic upheavals, global strife, and it can help protect you now. Birch Gold, my gold company, will help you convert an IRA of 401k into an IRA in physical gold, and it doesn't cost you a penny out of pocket. In the past 4 years, the buying power of the US dollar has declined. The price of gold has increased 40%. Hey, is it a coincidence? I think not. How do you get started? Text Dinesh to 989898. You'll get a free information kit on gold. Just information, nothing to lose. Then talk to Birch Gold. You can trust Birch Gold as I do to protect your savings. Text Dinesh to 989898 today.
I am delighted to welcome to the podcast Joe Kent, the Republican nominee for Congress from Washington's 3rd Congressional District. Joe, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Great to be with you.
Yeah. Well, this is so exciting. I'm so excited about your race because I was so invested in your race in 2022. You are a great America First fighter. So we really need you in Congress, just there in general, whichever way we get there. So, okay, tell us a little bit about your race this time around and kind of what the situation is in these last couple of weeks.
Yeah, so this is a rematch for me. I'm running against Marie Perez. She's a radical Democrat. I lost to her by less than a percentage point last time after a very hard-fought Republican primary. I took down one of the Trump impeachment voters in a primary last go-around. But last time, we had a very divided, fractured Republican Party just from the primary process. This time, the Republican Party is unified. This is a district that President Trump has won by 4 points in 2016 and in 2020. So it's a conservative district. And my Democrat opponent, basically the last time we ran against each other, she could say whatever she wanted to because she didn't have a voting record. And now for the last 2 years in Congress, she has been voting in lockstep with the Democrats. So she voted for the wide open southern border. She voted for all the inflation. She even voted to put men into our daughter's dressing room. So really this election for me, it's all about highlighting how radical her voting record is and then just laying out how we're going to get this country back on track by, balancing the budget and securing the border, just common sense things. So I'm cautiously optimistic. The Democrats have a ton of money and a ton of lies, but the facts are on our side, and I think the people are too.
Yeah, well, that's exciting. Well, I'm sure that you have gotten your chance to really know everyone in the district now. What is your district like? You're in Washington.
Yeah, so we're actually in Southwest Washington. So we are actually just right across the Columbia River from Portland, Oregon. But despite that, the district is pretty common sense, pretty conservative. Vancouver, Washington, which is part of the Portland metropolitan area almost, is a small growing city that's trying to learn from the mistakes of Portland and Seattle and stay prosperous. The rest of the district, though, is actually very rural. It's timber country USA. It's the part of the country that has really been hurt by government overregulation in the form of excessive regulation on the timber industry, the fishing industry. So it's a big district, very rural, very diverse. People think of us out here on the West Coast as all being kind of crazy liberals. However, this is a district that's right on the heart of really the heart of the Pacific Northwest. Our most western county actually touches the Pacific Ocean. So it's really just a common sense district. I just think that the Democrats have gone so far off the rails that we are now the party of common sense. And I'm optimistic about spreading that message and just the momentum that we built.
Yeah, that's very exciting. I mean, I'd love if more of the Pacific Northwest became conservative because it's so beautiful up there. It's so gorgeous. So, Joe, tell me a little bit about kind of what your plan is the next few weeks. Do you feel like the focus is mostly on the economy, on inflation, on border issues like you mentioned? What are going to be some of your focuses?
I'd say here we're about 19 days out. I think as of today, we do a lot of early voting. So actually, we already have one county that is in the process of early voting. So we've already started our ballot harvesting operations. Washington's all mail out, and it's completely legal in Washington for any person to collect ballots and turn them in. I wish that wasn't the case, but those are the rules here. And historically, Republicans have really shied away from that. We don't like it, so we weren't participating. We, in the last 2 years, have kind of redone the way that we conduct our ground game. And so we are ballot harvesting very, very heavily right now in the one county that's voting, because we have a lot of low propensity Trump voters who didn't participate in 2022. These guys don't participate in midterms. They don't participate in municipal elections, but they come out every 4 years. So really, in the next couple weeks, we are going ground game and turnout heavy, especially in our rural counties, because if we get ballots in front of our rural voters, they go Republican straight ticket. Our challenge is making sure they get those ballots across the finish line. But in terms of issues, really, like the economy, even people who like probably couldn't tell you what a Republican or a Democrat is, they know that whoever's running the economy right now is really messing things up. So, you always hear these different charts and studies from Washington, D.C. about how the economy is stronger than ever and all this nonsense about inflation rates. You can't lie to the people that are trying to fill up a tank of gas or trying to pay for groceries. Our costs here, just like the rest of the country, are just out of control. So I think inflation, and then tied with border, I mean, we share a border with Canada. However, the I-5 corridor goes right through the heart of our district. California, Oregon, and Washington are all sanctuary states, and the cartels are really exploiting that. We have a fentanyl epidemic in our district. Fentanyl deaths are up like 25% in our district. So that issue right there, and the fact that my opponent voted to leave the border open, there's a famous quote of her we have up on several commercials of her saying, look, nobody stays awake at night worrying about the southern border as people in our district are dying from fentanyl overdoses. So really just the fentanyl overdoses and the lack of a lawlessness that we've had really since 2020, the defund the police movement never truly ended here in the Pacific Northwest, unfortunately. So crime in places that historically were very safe, great places to raise families, crime has skyrocketed as well. And then another issue that like the Democrats just cannot defend, my opponent included. My opponent's trying to sell herself as a moderate, but she took that vote to allow biological men to enter women's bathrooms, locker rooms, and to compete against them on the athletics field. So we're really highlighting that because that resonates with a lot of parents. Again, people who aren't politically engaged, they couldn't tell you if they're in a red state or a blue state, but when they hear that their elected officials voted to let men in their daughters' dressing rooms, they then realize that, hey, we're the side of common sense. So that's our big effort here the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, well, that's so exciting. You said so many good things. I mean, the ground game element is great because in those states like California, Washington, we have to be doing what's legal as far as ballot harvesting because the left is doing it. And if we're not doing the same thing, we're going to be losing every time. And I think a lot of the Republicans in California wisened up to that because they were dealing with that for a while too. And they realized, whoa, we have to do this. And then they actually, they picked up some House seats, I think, as a result. So, whatever we can do in those areas, I mean, we have to be doing them. And I'm sure that that's going to pay off hugely. Do you find that you guys are affected? This is kind of a different question, but do you guys find you're affected by the craziness going on in Portland? Or is Portland very isolated and kind of like its own little island? Or does it like bleed out to neighboring areas where you guys are?
Unfortunately, Portlandia bleeds out in a very big way. Portland and Vancouver, there's a bridge that connects them. My Democrat opponent wants to put light rail that connects downtown Portland into the district. She's gotten some federal funding allocated to build a new bridge, which we do need a new bridge. But the way the federal government has structured the money, it's going to include light rail. The thing is, the people in the district in Clark County, which is where the light rail would be on the Washington side, they've rejected light rail on 3 separate occasions. It's been on the ballot and it's been defeated every single time for obvious reasons. Portland has a huge problem with homelessness, with fentanyl, and then just with a lack of actual law and order. And so the light rail would just dump all of downtown Portland's problems into downtown Vancouver. And so we do see a very much an effect of what takes place in Portland. It really transfers over to Vancouver. And there's a lot of great entrepreneurs and businessmen who have spent a lot of time and a lot of money making the downtown in Vancouver really, really nice and a friendly place for business, a friendly place for people to go shop and dine along the Columbia River. It's absolutely beautiful. And so a lot of the businesses that have fled Portland because of the problems they've had have actually come over to Vancouver. And now we have Democrats that are attempting to basically unite these cities. And then on our northern end of the district, it's a very big district. We actually share a little bit of one of the counties with Olympia. We have that light rail project that's supposed to connect. In theory, what the Democrats on the Oregon and Washington side want to do is they want to connect Portland and Seattle via light rail. Seattle. So I tell people up in our northern counties along the I-5 corridor, if they actually have their plans come to fruition, you get the opportunity to have vagrants from both Portland and Seattle dumped off onto your front doorstep. So the problems of Portland, and the lawlessness and all that, it does sprawl out. So these issues, especially if sanctuary cities, Portland refuses to honor ICE detainers. Washington State's a sanctuary state too. We actually just recently tragically had a Washington State trooper who was killed by an illegal immigrant who had an ICE detainer on him for well over 3 years. He was supposed to have been deported 3 years ago, but Washington State gave him sanctuary. So look, these issues of law and order, I mean, they have a major effect. And the fentanyl crisis and law and order, there's not a part of my district, even the most rural corners, that these issues have not touched.
Yeah, it's crazy because if you're in a sanctuary city, a sanctuary state, it's like even if your area is conservative, you're going to be affected by illegals and all of this, and they're sending them all over the country. I think because the Democrats are like, if we have all of them in one place, it's going to be too much mayhem and then, people will be onto us, but they've been spreading it out, but it's adding up, all the number of people. And so eventually, I mean, any life lost is too many, but eventually people are just like, whoa, this is not a safe place anymore. Even though we don't believe in any of this larger area we're part of has become too liberal. But I think the immigration issue is going to be a winning one for Republicans because people know that Kamala Harris has been the border czar. They know that under Biden, we've had so many more illegal crossings. And they know, like you said, with the economy, it's so much worse. So really, I mean, I can't imagine what common sense voters would see with Biden and Harris. I guess they're relying on mostly issues like abortion, but you even mentioned other social issues like the trans issue. So they're not common sense on any of those things. I saw, interestingly, that they're running ads on the trans issue for other types of Senate races too. So that issue seems to be somehow resurfacing in a lot of states, even though, economy, immigration is big. It's like sometimes with things like the trans issue, it becomes so clear, I just can't agree with this because it's just too far beyond.
Yeah, there's no wiggle room there because the Democrats and all of them, I see that the guy that Ted Cruz is running against down there in Texas, that he voted for a very similar bill that my opponent voted for. And so like when you talk about the economy or the border, I feel like the Democrats have a lot of counterpoints they can throw out that are complete and total spin and propaganda, but they confuse people. And they're like, well, the Republicans say this stat, the Democrats say this stat. I don't know. It's kind of confusing. But when you say, hey, clear cut, here's the vote. These Democrats, my opponent, and pretty much Democrats across the country, every Democrat in Congress voted to put men into your daughter's dressing room and to compete against them on the athletics field. And I've brought this up the 3 times I've debated my opponent, and there's nowhere for her to go. I mean, she has talking points for basically every other bad vote that she's taken. However, this one, you really see them squirm because if you're in front of a group of just common sense people, they do not buy that. That does not sit well with common sense people. Even folks who might consider themselves to be Democrats or apolitical, they really can't weasel their way out of that because it is egregious. Because 10, 15 years ago, there is no way that we'd be discussing, hey, do you think it's a good idea for us to let men into the little girls' room and to compete in sports against them? That just wouldn't even be a conversation that people would have in a serious country. But here we are, and every Democrat's completely captured by it. I mean, they will not even denounce. I mean, the other night when we were debating, my opponent was asked point blank by one of the moderators, well, then do you support so-called transgender men competing against women on the athletics field? And she had this like very squirmy answer of like, well, it kind of depends on like the person, it depends on the sport. And like when common sense people hear that, they're just like, oh, okay, this side is crazy. So I think it's something that we need to hammer because it's important to protect young girls and young women. But also, look, the Democrats, they voted for this and we can't let them off the hook.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, shifting a little, I saw on X, your description says you are a Green Beret and Gold Star husband. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I spent a little over 20 years in the Army, was in Special Forces, did 11 combat deployments, did a little stint in the CIA as well. My late wife, who was also in the military, was killed fighting ISIS in Syria. She was actually killed a month after Trump tried to get our troops out of Syria. So I had a front row seat from where I was in the CIA watching mid-level bureaucrats really turn against President Trump, which inspired me to leave the service, but really start speaking out on behalf of President Trump's foreign policy. That's kind of what got me into politics. So what happened with my late wife and really trying to provide a better future for my kids, that's why I'm in this fight.
Wow. I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank
I
you.
can't imagine going through that. Did you find that when you were going through that, just, I can't imagine that crisis, that change in life, did that change any of your beliefs or views or how you look at the world or at politics or anything? Just, does that affect any of your views in running for Congress?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it really solidified a lot of the views. I was an early Trump supporter because I'd spent so long in the military, and I was actually sitting in Iraq when Trump was on the primary stage, and he went after like the neoconservative ideology. And I
Mm.
sort of knew who Donald Trump was, like from pop culture, and I was just like, okay, how come the guy from The Apprentice understands how bad we've screwed things up? How come he understands that at a better level than all the so-called experts? So he actually had me and my late wife support pretty early on the issue of foreign policy because we had both. I mean, my late wife was killed on her fifth combat deployment. That was basically what we did from 9/11 on. Was we went overseas and we fought for our country. We were happy to do it, but we did eventually see that we were being lied to. So watching Trump come in as commander in chief with a mandate from the American people to get us out of these foreign wars, and then when he actually tried to get us out of the foreign wars, watching these mid-level bureaucrats, people who I had worked with and for now for at this point for 2 decades, turn against the president. I was like, wow, things actually are as rotten as many people. I didn't want to believe that things were as rotten as many people said that they were because I was knee deep in it. But then watching that actually transpire, I was shocked. And so I never planned on running for Congress or anything like that. But I said, hey, I got to take care of my kids, stop deploying overseas and stuff. But I do want to start speaking out because there wasn't a lot of people who had a background in national security who were kind of backing up what Trump was saying. Trump's instincts on national security and foreign policy in particular, they're very, very solid. And I think we see that now. At the time in 2016, 2017, there wasn't a lot of data to back it up. But now, I mean, look at the contrast. Again, it's just kind of common sense. Like, was the world safer 4 years ago or right now that we're on the cusp of World War III? So for me, it really just solidified and clarified a lot of gut feelings that I already had. And then watching, the woman I initially ran against, who was a Republican who voted for Trump's impeachment. I mean, I voted for her because she was a Republican. And so watching the Republican apparatus then continue to turn on Trump, especially after 2020 and everything, I was just like, okay, there's no one coming to save us. Like, we all have to get engaged. So that's why I'm still in it.
Yeah, oh my goodness. I mean, I think President Trump's policies of, peace through strength, things like that, it's like that's why the military overwhelmingly supports Trump. It's crazy when Biden and Harris, they come up with these crazy stories about Trump not supporting our military or our police or something. And I'm like, you do realize that that's kind of like where Trump is very strong and I mean, like you said, you witnessed him then, but I've heard stories that when people overseas meet President Trump, they're in awe of him, but it's different, probably seeing Biden or something coming to visit versus President Trump. So as far as your story, so you were part of the services while President Trump was in office. Did you and your wife meet in the service, or were you
Mhm.
meeting before that? Or okay.
We both met in the military, so we both actually got picked up for a special operations unit that kind of combines special operations guys. And my wife was in intelligence. She spoke Arabic and was on the intel side. So we both ended up in the same unit and fell in love really fast and started our family when we were both in our 30s. And so we intended to continue serving our country. It was something we were both very passionate about. She's a native New Yorker, so her father and uncle were both ground zero first responders. Her and her little brother both joined the military and served a career afterwards, just deploying to combat. So we felt that our duty, our role as a family was to protect our country. And when Trump came on the scene and really just started speaking to how we as a nation had been misled, we really felt like for the first time we actually had a voice, somebody who was saying all the things that we were saying, that was now our commander in chief. So yeah, we met in the military and started our family that way. So yeah.
Wow. So you had really like a joint mission.
We
It's
did.
so kind of a different situation, but it reminds me of the woman in the Olympics who was from Italy and she was fighting against the gender questionable Imane
Oh
Khalif
yeah.
person. And
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
had that like mission with her dad to, go and fight and do this. And it was so crushing when she was just like couldn't punch back or anything because she just said, I've
Yeah.
never been hit so hard in my life. It's just like made me think of that because it's like, wow, she had this like mission with her dad and this like, I don't know, this inspiration to fight on. And that seems like, you guys have like an inspiration, but now that she's not with you anymore, it's like you have to carry that forward.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. So for me, after Shannon was killed, I just said, hey, I'm going to step back and I'm going to take care of our kids. But I was really, inspired to speak out on behalf of President Trump. But then just watching the way our country kind of imploded during 2020, between the riots and between the lockdowns and the election, I was like, man, if we keep going down this path, by the time my kids are, teenagers or young adults, we're not going to have a country. And they're going to look back at me and say like, well, what country did our mom die for? Like, what was it all worth? And so for me, it's like we have got to fight as hard as we can to make sure the sacrifices that were made by my late wife and so many other Americans, 13 generations of Americans, that we continue that legacy, because it's just, I think it should be obvious to everyone. If we do 4 more years of what we've had for the past 4 years, our country is going to be fundamentally different. I hate to be hyperbolic and say this is the most important election and all that type of stuff, but it truly is, because I do not see how the country endures so many crises abroad and at home with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. It's just not realistic. So yeah, right. We're fighting on for the legacy of those who gave their lives for our nation.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Joe, thank you so much. Thank you to your family for your service and sacrifice, and best of luck in the last few weeks. I'm sure you're going to win big. So I'm excited.
Thank you very much. We're pushing really hard. If people can support, joekentforcongress.com is the website. We're getting outspent by 4-1. So anything folks can give, it's greatly appreciated.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
FDNY firefighter Daniel Foley assisted in rescue and recovery efforts at Ground Zero, but Daniel couldn't have known then that his heroism would cost him his life. More than 18 years later, his death, like so many others, resulted from 9/11 related illnesses caused by the toxic dust that formed when the Twin Towers collapsed. Victims and first responders are still suffering and dying from 9/11, yet children in this nation are growing up unaware of America's darkest day. That's why the Tunnel to Towers 9/11 Institute is helping educators teach children about 9/11. Tunnel to Towers 9/11 curriculum units have scripted lessons, background for teachers, and activities for students. They're based on first-person accounts and designed to meet academic standards. The 9/11 Institute offers the Discovering Heroes book series, a speakers bureau, a mobile exhibit with 9/11 artifacts, and memorial scholarships for the children of the Foundation's program recipients. Help our nation keep its promise to never forget. How can you help? Donate $11 a month to Tunnel to Towers at T2T.org. That's T, the number 2, T.org. Are you feeling overwhelmed by the increasing cost of health insurance? Have you had enough of not having control over your healthcare dollars? Introducing Share Right. It's healthcare done the right way. At Share Right, you're not just a number, you're part of a caring community. Forget about paying excessive premiums. With Share Right, you stand to save 30 to 50% compared to health insurance. So think about what you could do with all those savings. But it's more than just savings. Share Right ensures you have access to the care you deserve precisely when you need it, from routine checkups to unexpected emergencies. With Share Right, your healthcare is their top priority. Empower yourself today by taking control of your healthcare costs. Visit shareright.org/Dinesh to learn more. See how much you can save. Visit shareright.org/Dinesh. That's shareright.org/Dinesh for healthcare done the right way.
Leftists are like alchemists, promising to transform base metals into gold, as they pledge to establish a perfect society which will come about through some incomprehensible, even magical process. Last summer, during his acceptance speech at the Republican National Convention, JD Vance asked voters to abandon the lockstep leftist agenda, their magical thinking that is allergic to sunlight. Vance invited us to be open-minded, practical, and willing to debate issues. He said, quote, "My message to my fellow Americans, those watching from across the country, is shouldn't we be governed by a party that is unafraid to debate ideas and come to the best solution? That's the Republican Party of the next 4 years, united in our love for this country and committed to free speech and the open exchange of ideas. During the vice presidential debate, Vance showed the country what such a policy conversation looks like. Even the media had to marvel at the aplomb and geniality with which Vance presented his arguments. The North American correspondent for the BBC, Anthony Zurcher, for example, described the event as an even-tempered, policy-focused debate with few political body blows. The BBC, like so many media outlets, grudgingly admitted that Vance won the debate hands down. Another fact the corporate media has been forced to concede is that JD Vance, like Donald Trump, genuinely cares about what is happening to middle Americans. Zurcher acknowledged the appeal of Vance's sincerity, saying, if Vance was picked because he puts ideological meat on the bones of Trump's conservative populism, on Tuesday night, he put a polite, humble face on them as well. This polite, humble face of conservative populism has as its source policies that are focused first and foremost on human flourishing, not market forces, money, or media clout. JD Vance, like Donald Trump, puts the concerns of voters first. It wasn't just the media that was struck by JD Vance's success. Pollster Frank Luntz noted that the independents in his focus group did a 180 in their attitude toward the Ohio senator throughout the debate. The day after the vice presidential debate, Luntz told CNN that, quote, only twice in my career have I had such an overwhelming movement towards one candidate. That is how significant the debate was. Focus group overwhelmingly stated that Vance won the debate. Now, many people say, who knows what's going to be the influences of a vice presidential debate? But the point is that if you did watch the debate, it moved you towards Vance. And some independents were bound to have watched that debate. So even if it's a very small sliver of them, it still makes a huge difference because we need every single independent we can get. Voters in the group said JD Vance was intelligent, that he ran the show, that he was sincere and authentic. Concerning Walz, Frank Luntz said, quote, he did not connect as well because he was much less specific. The focus group, Luntz continued, was particularly critical that Walz was not answering the questions the moderators were proposing. He concluded that in a vice presidential debate, voters expect more from the candidates than to try to duck the questions, as Walz did repeatedly throughout the debate. So beyond the obvious fact that JD Vance is a brilliant and skilled debater, and Walz is not, what differences between the candidates become apparent in the vice presidential debate, you might ask? For starters, Senator Vance, like President Trump, puts people first. He made that clear. Governor Walz and Vice President Harris speak a great deal in platitudes. They don't speak specifically about people. They speak a great deal about how future infusions of tax money will be allocated by Congress to pay for border security, for student loan debt, for more IRS agents, and so on. After they pass a bill and requisition of funds, they reassure us, whatever ails us as a country will be magically fixed. This difference in focus creates a stark choice for voters because it leads to wildly different policies. Underlying Walz's belief in the primacy of money as the best solution to any social problem is his Marxist ideology, which has long made him a great admirer of China's state-run system. On August 6th, the New York Post ran a story that quotes Walz saying, I don't fall into the category that China necessarily needs to be an adversarial relationship. Despite the massacre of students at Tiananmen Square or China's many and ongoing human rights violations, Walz insists that he, quote, totally disagrees with the notion that China should be sanctioned or held to account. Richard Grenell, the former acting director of national intelligence for President Trump, wrote on X, quote, no one is more pro-China than Marxist Walz. According to a recent BBC article, Walz's decades-long relationship with China is well documented. It goes back to his first trip in 1989, when Walz, a recent college graduate, was part of the first cohort participating in a Harvard University volunteer program for teaching English and American history to Chinese high school students. This led to the business he began with his wife, where American high school students were given educational trips to China every summer, leading to Walz visiting China over 30 times in a decade. Walz and his wife even honeymooned in China. Never heard of that one before. Praising China's system was a part of Walz's teaching method in his social studies classes. The Washington Free Beacon reports that, quote, Tim Walz used favorable language to describe Chinese communism when teaching in 1991, according to an unearthed article in Nebraska's Alliance Times-Herald. In the news article, Walz is quoted as telling students that, quote, under communism, everyone shares and gets free food and housing from the government. These and other quotations reveal that Walz's Marxist leanings cause him to see exercising government power through the control of money as the best way to solve problems in his mind. For Marxists, money is not only power, but the key to ushering in their utopian society. Karl Marx writes in the Economic and Philosophic Manuscripts of 1844 that, quote, if money is the bond binding me to human life, binding society to me, connecting me with nature and man, is not money the bond of all bonds? Can it not dissolve and bind all ties? Is it not therefore also the universal agent of separation? It is the coin that really separates as well as the real binding agent, the chemical power of society. For leftists, this Marxist replacing of normal human bonds with economic ones based merely on financial relationships is a sacrosanct tenet of good governance, they say. Money is the bond of all bonds. Quote, the chemical power of society. Quote, this belief undergirds many policy solutions touted by Walz in the debate. When asked about housing, Walz said, quote, the fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base. Government spending, Walz assures us, will solve the housing problem. Likewise, on the issue of border security in the debate, Walz said that it is a job of Congress to pass a bill and unlock funding for Border Patrol agents. He promises that if Congress would just pass a law and give the government more money, the border will be fixed post-haste. Walz assures us that the Border Patrol, he said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up these adjunctions and this. Just what America wants. Money, money, money. The alchemical power of society, Walz concludes, will fix the border. Now, by contrast, JD Vance's answers during the debate identified causes and focused on real solutions. Vance's solutions always begin with people on a different path forward with the goal of human flourishing in mind, rather than government spending. For instance, when he was asked about how to solve the border crisis, Vance first stated the cause, giving precise numbers and accurate details. He said, quote, we have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system that has opened the floodgates. After identifying the cause, Vance talked about what steps Americans should take to solve the issues plaguing our southern border. Talking about deportations, Vance insisted that Americans, quote, have to stop the bleeding. Meaning with 20 to 25 million illegal immigrants already in the country, the priority is to reestablish order. He then suggested how the deportations should proceed. Vance said, quote, I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks, and then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. Here, Vance suggested an action, and he supported his suggestion by explaining how it will help Americans, in particular, American workers, to prosper. This is very different from Walz, who simply insisted that more money is needed to fix the problem. Vance said, quote, "A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work." Vance continued by noting that fentanyl use is more prevalent now due to the out-of-control border. He talked about his mother's fight against addiction, saying, quote, "I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels." At that point, instead of calling for more funding for drug rehab centers and the like, Vance mentioned common sense solutions to the problem, thereby opening himself up to the usual leftist complaints that he is targeting minorities, being racist, possibly even channeling Hitler. Vance suggested following the deportation laws already on the books, thereby empowering Border Patrol agents to protect their communities. At that point, Walz accused him of lacking charity and of calling for Americans out of fear and even hate the already suffering migrant communities across the country. Rather than cower and hide from the possibility that he would be labeled racist or worse, Vance boldly proclaimed that as vice president, he would put Americans first. Vance said, "Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you have schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes." JD Vance bravely stated the current state of affairs we all know to be true, despite the pushback from leftists he was sure to receive. Like Donald Trump, Vance is more concerned with helping his fellow citizens than currying favor with the media. Vance concluded by reminding us that he is committed to helping our nation succeed at home and abroad. For instance, on the topic of Middle America being used to relocate large number of immigrants, Vance noted, "The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace." Walz responded by once again mentioning the need for funding. He insisted that passing a border bill would fix everything. Walz said, "Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate." JD Vance focused on what will help his fellow Americans, while Walz focused on ways to increase government spending. The Trump-Vance ticket advocates for Americans, while the Harris-Walz candidacy pushes for increase in funding, despite the fact that spending money on these problems is all the Biden administration has been doing for the past 3.5 years, and it hasn't resulted in anything good. Donald Trump and JD Vance offer America an escape from this Marxist lunacy. It seems these days that leftist politicians are alchemists after all. Scholar Peggy Ann Knapp explains their love of this image, writing that, quote, "Alchemy is Karl Marx's insistent metaphor for capitalist exchange in Das Kapital. The circulation of capital is, quote, the great social retort into which everything is thrown, to come out again as the money crystal. Nothing is immune from this alchemy. The bones of saints cannot withstand it." I think we have found a pair of gentlemen who in fact can withstand the Marxist money crystal. JD Vance and Donald Trump are inviting us to abandon the alchemists and try to come up with common sense solutions to our problems. Let's pray they are successful in November.
I want you to order Balance of Nature fruits and veggies in a capsule, but before you do that, wait till you hear what I have to say. If you go to balanceofnature.com, you'll check out these. This is their popular fruit and veggie supplements, fruit and veggies in a capsule. But you might see a discount offer pop up. It may say 20% or 25% off your first order. Well, don't click that. Why? Because if you use my promo code, you'll get 35% off your first order plus free shipping. The special code is simply the word America. Use the code and save big. Here's another bonus. Balance of Nature has a risk-free money-back guarantee. So go ahead and find out for yourself what I already know. There's no other product out there like Balance of Nature when it comes to fruit and veggie supplements. Whether you order online or call direct, you got to use promo code America to get the special offer, 35% off and free shipping. Here's the number to call, 800-246-8751. Again, 800-246-8751, or go to balanceofnature.com. When you use discount code America, you get 35% off and free shipping.
If you enjoyed the show, make sure to follow me on social media. If you can, I am on Facebook, Instagram, X, Truth Social, Rumble. I'm Danielle D'Souza Gill, and that's the place to find me. So I will see you guys there, and I'll see you all tomorrow. MAGA.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.